Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen, but some left a darker mark than others. These empires weren't just about power, they were built on cruelty, conquest, and terror. Imagine a world where entire civilizations were crushed under the weight of unimaginable brutality. In this video, we'll dive deep into the most ruthless empires in history, exploring how their reigns of terror. The Assyrian Empire, which thrived from the 9th to 7th century BCE, was one of the most ruthless civilizations the world has ever known. Known for their unparalleled military might and terrifying tactics, the Assyrians dominated much of the Near East with their brutal conquests. At its height, the Assyrian Empire stretched from modern-day Iraq to parts of Turkey, Iran, and Syria. What set the Assyrians apart was unteed. Just their sizit was their ability to instill fear in the hearts of every civilization they encountered. The Assyrians had perfected the art of terror. Their king, Ashurbanipal, was notorious for his cruelty, and the empire's soldiers were relentless in battle. The Assyrians employed tactics that would shock modern-day armies. When they conquered a city, they didn't just occupy it, they destroyed it completely. They would burn buildings, desecrate sacred sites, and, in many cases, engage in horrific acts of violence. Prisoners were not taken lightly. They were often tortured and executed in the most gruesome ways imaginable. Historical accounts describe how the Assyrians would flay their enemies alive, a practice meant to send a chilling message to anyone who might dare to defy them. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Assyrian Empire was its use of psychological warfare. The Assyrians knew that fear could be a more powerful weapon than any sword or spear. When approaching a new city, they would often send ahead a small group of soldiers to execute a public display of brutality, beheading prisoners, impaling bodies on spikes, and leaving these gruesome reminders for the city's inhabitants. This tactic was so effective that many cities surrendered without a fight, too terrified to resist. In addition to their bloodthirsty military conquests, the Assyrians also had a sophisticated system of governance that was built around control and intimidation. The king's decrees were absolute, and any sign of disloyalty was met with swift and brutal punishment. The Assyrians even developed a network of spies and informants to keep an eye on their subjects, ensuring no one would dare betray the empire. Despite their reign of terror, the Assyrians were also incredibly advanced in terms of culture and technology. They built some of the most impressive cities of the ancient world, such as Nineveh, with its grand palaces, libraries, and walls adorned with intricate carvings. However, this cultural brilliance was overshadowed by their savage methods of maintaining control. The downfall of the Assyrian Empire was inevitable. The very tactics that had made them so powerful, terror, fear, and brutality, also made them hated. In 612 BCE, a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians launched an attack on Nineveh, and after a prolonged siege, the Assyrian capital fell. The empire that had once instilled terror across the ancient world crumbled into dust. When most people think of brutal empires, the Mongol Empire often tops the list. Spanning from the steppes of Mongolia to Europe, the Mongols, led by the legendary Genghis Khan, became the most feared conquerors the world had ever known. Their empire, which lasted from the early 13th century to the late 14th century, left a trail of destruction that reshaped entire civilizations and redefined the nature of warfare. The Mongols were not just skilled warriors. They were masters of psychological terror. Genghis Khan, born as Temujin, united the disparate Mongol tribes with an iron will and a ruthless drive for conquest. He understood that the key to victory was speed, surprise, and, most importantly, fear. The Mongol army was composed of highly disciplined horse archers who could strike quickly, retreat, and strike again, leaving their enemies bewildered and unable to defend themselves. When the Mongols moved into a new territory, they didn't just fight. They devastated entire populations. Cities that resisted the Mongols' advances were obliterated. One of the most notorious examples was the siege of Nishapur in 1221. After the city refused to surrender, the Mongols massacred its inhabitants, reportedly killing over 1.7 million people. The Mongol forces were so efficient in their killing that they would often leave entire cities empty, with the streets littered with the bodies of the fallen. The Mongols also employed brutal psychological tactics that were designed to break the will of their enemies before the battle even began. They would send small raiding parties ahead of their main force to conduct terror raids on nearby villages. These raids were often accompanied by messages of doom, warning that any resistance would be met with annihilation. The Mongols understood the power of fear. After witnessing the destruction of a neighboring village, many cities would surrender without a fight, knowing that to resist meant total destruction. Another terrifying aspect of the Mongol Empire was their use of biological warfare. In one of the most infamous instances, the Mongols are believed to have catapulted the bodies of plague victims over the walls of the besieged city of Kaffa, modern-day Feodosia, in Crimea, in 1347. This act is often cited as one of the ways the Black Death spread into Europe, killing millions. While there is debate over whether this event was the primary cause of the plague spread, there is no question that the Mongols used disease as a weapon in their campaigns. Despite their cruelty, the Mongols were also skilled administrators, and have left behind The Roman Empire, one of the most powerful empires in history, is remembered for its remarkable achievements in governance, culture, and military strategy. However, alongside its advancements, the Romans were known for their brutality, especially when it came to conquering new territories and maintaining control over their vast empire. At its height, the Roman Empire spanned from the British Isles to the Middle East, from North Africa to the edges of modern-day Germany. This vast expanse required not only sophisticated infrastructure and governance, but also an iron grip on its subjects. Rome's power was built upon both its military might and its unrelenting approach to control. The Roman army, the backbone of the empire, was a force to be reckoned with. Soldiers were highly trained, disciplined, and relentless. The Roman military machine was designed to conquer, and once a region was conquered, the Romans often employed brutal methods to keep it in line. One of the most infamous examples of Roman brutality was their treatment of rebellious provinces. The Romans were known to destroy cities that resisted their rule, and they would often execute the leaders of these revolts in the most public and gruesome ways. Perhaps the most famous victim of crucifixion was Jesus of Nazareth, but thousands of others met their end in this agonizing manner. Crucifixion was not just a punishment, it was a spectacle meant to instill fear and remind the conquered peoples of Rome's absolute power. The Roman legions also used terror as a tool of control. After the destruction of the city of Carthage in 146 BCE, the Romans salted the earth so that nothing could grow there again, ensuring that the city could never be rebuilt. The slaughter of the Carthaginian citizens, many of whom were sold into slavery, sent a clear message to any potential enemies. Resistance meant complete annihilation. Similarly, the Roman Empire's conquest of Gaul, led by Julius Caesar in the 1st century BCE, was marked by mass executions and the enslavement of entire populations. In his campaigns, Caesar boasted of slaughtering 1 million Gauls and enslaving 1 million more, showcasing the empire's ruthless approach to expansion. While the Romans were merciless in their conquests, they were also highly organized. The Roman Empire's system of governance was built on maintaining order through a strict hierarchy, legal codes, and extensive surveillance. Roman citizens were governed by laws, but those who were conquered often found themselves subject to Roman authority without any legal protections. The idea of Pax Romana, Roman peace, was established as a means of bringing stability, but it came at a great cost. For many, this peace was nothing more than the quiet that followed Roman domination and subjugation. The Romans also employed psychological warfare, such as public executions, gladiatorial games, and spectacles. To assert their dominance, the Ottoman Empire, which spanned over 600 years, was one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history. From the 14th century to the early 20th century, the Ottomans controlled vast regions of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa, becoming a dominant force in both military and political arenas. However, beneath the empire's grandeur lay a brutal history of conquest, suppression, and terror, with the Ottomans employing fear and force to expand their rule and maintain control. At its height, the Ottoman Empire stretched from modern-day Turkey to parts of the Balkans, Egypt, and even into parts of Arabia and Persia. Its strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia allowed it to control vital trade routes and dominate vast territories. The Ottomans, like other empires of their time, relied heavily on their military to expand and protect their dominion. The Janissaries, the elite infantry soldiers of the Ottoman Empire, were feared across the world for their discipline and fighting prowess. These soldiers were often recruited from Christian communities through the Devshirme system, where young boys were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained to serve the Sultan as soldiers or civil servants. The Janissaries were not only a key military force, but also a symbol of the Ottoman Empire's control. In many ways, they represented the empire's brutal approach to domination. The Devshirme system was a form of indoctrination, and while it may have provided upward mobility for some, it also served as a constant reminder of the Ottomans' power over the populations they subjugated. The practice of taking young boys from their families, often forcibly, and turning them into soldiers was a cruel and effective way to ensure loyalty to the Sultan and maintain control over the empire's vast territories. The Ottomans were also known for their brutal treatment of those who resisted their rule. Cities and regions that defied the Sultan's authority were often subjected to horrific punishments. One of the most infamous examples of Ottoman cruelty occurred during the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. When the Ottomans under Sultan Mehmed II captured the Byzantine capital, they massacred thousands of its inhabitants. The fall of Constantinople, the Spanish Empire, one of the first global empires, is a tale of both extraordinary achievements and devastating brutality. Spanning vast territories across the Americas, Asia, Africa, and Europe, Spain's influence in the 15th to 18th centuries was unrivaled. However, the empire's expansion was built on terror, conquest, and the relentless pursuit of gold and power, leaving a legacy of oppression that still resonates today. The Spanish Empire began its rise with the voyages of Christopher Columbus in 1492, which marked the beginning of European colonization in the New World. Spain quickly established itself as a dominant colonial power, seeking to extract wealth from the newly discovered Americas. The Spanish conquistadors, led by figures like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, used extreme violence and cruelty to conquer the indigenous peoples of the Americas. These men were driven by the promise of riches and glory, and they employed horrifying tactics to achieve their goals. When Cortés arrived in Mexico in 1519, he encountered the mighty Aztec Empire, ruled by Montezuma II. What followed was a campaign of terror. Cortés, aided by thousands of indigenous allies who had turned against their Aztec rulers, besieged the capital city of Tenochtitlan. The resulting conquest was brutal. Cortés and his men looted the city, killed countless Aztec warriors, and subjected the population to horrific atrocities. Montezuma, the Aztec emperor, was taken prisoner, and despite attempts to resist, he ultimately died in captivity. Following the conquest, the Spanish destroyed much of the city and imposed their control over the region, establishing Mexico as a vital part of their empire. Similar stories unfolded across the Americas. Francisco Pizarro's conquest of the Inca Empire in Peru in 1532 is another example of Spanish cruelty. Pizarro's army, vastly outnumbered by the Inca forces, used deception and ruthless tactics to capture the Inca emperor, Atahualpa, demanding a ransom in gold, which was delivered by the Incas. Pizarro executed Atahualpa anyway, leading to the complete collapse of the Incan civilization.